What if I told you that by November 2026, an entire $47 billion industry could be wiped out with the stroke of a pen? And that's just the beginning. Right now, while you're watching this video, legislators are quietly passing laws that will make 11 essential prepping items either illegal to buy, heavily restricted, or so expensive that regular folks like us won't be able to afford them anymore. I've spent the last 3 weeks digging through legislative documents, regulatory filings, and industry reports. What I found honestly shocked me. The items I'm about to share with you aren't some crazy conspiracy theory. These are real laws, with real deadlines, affecting real products that many of us rely on for emergency preparedness. Let me start with something that's happening in less than 12 months. And this one hits close to home because, well, it affects millions of Americans who use these products for stress relief, sleep, and pain management. Items by 1 and 2. Delta E8 THC products and hemp-derived beverages. Last week, I was at my local gas station getting coffee, and I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was a guy in front of me buying about $200 worth of Delta 8 gummies and hemp drinks. Nothing unusual about that, right? People buy these products all the time for stress, sleep, pain management. But here's what that guy didn't know, and what 99% of Americans still don't know. In exactly 11 months, every single product he was buying will become federally illegal. Not regulated, not restricted, completely illegal. On November 12th, President Trump signed what's being called the hemp product ban as part of the government spending bill. Now, this wasn't some standalone legislation that got debated for months. This was buried inside a must-pass spending bill to reopen the government after a 43-day shutdown. Congress had to vote to pay our military or let these hemp provisions slide through. Guess which one they chose? Here's what actually happened. The new law completely redefines what counts as hemp under federal law. Since 2018, hemp has been defined as cannabis containing less than 0.3% Delta-9 THC by dry weight. That definition created what lawyers are calling a loophole that allowed companies to sell Delta-8, Delta-10, HHC, THCA, and low-dose THC products legally. But the new definition, it sets a total THC limit of just 0.4 milligrams per container. Let me put that in perspective. A typical hemp gummy contains between 2.5 and 10 milligrams of THC. So overnight, these products go from completely legal to federally classified as marijuana. But wait, it gets worse. The law also bans any cannabinoids that are synthesized or manufactured outside the plant. That means Delta-8 THC, which is converted from CBD through a chemical process, becomes illegal. HHC, which doesn't naturally occur in significant amounts, illegal. THCP, Delta-10, and pretty much everything you can buy at gas stations, smoke shops, and online, all of it becomes illegal. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not here to advocate for or against these products. What I'm telling you is that if you currently use these products for legitimate purposes, whether it's for sleep, anxiety, or pain, or you see them as potential barter items in a crisis, you have less than 1 year to stock up. The industry is in complete panic mode. I spoke with a distributor in Kentucky last week who told me that farmers are already plowing under their hemp crops because they don't know what they can legally grow anymore. Companies that built their entire business model around these products are desperately trying to reformulate, but most won't survive. Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky tried to strip this language from the spending bill. He called it legislation that would be prohibition. But he was overruled. Representative Nancy Mace from South Carolina has introduced legislation to repeal the ban, but with a Republican-controlled Congress that just voted for it, the chances of reversal are slim. Here's what really scares me about this whole situation. The hemp industry has grown from basically nothing in 2018 to $28.4 billion in 2025. It employs over 320,000 people. And the federal government just wiped it out with the stroke of a pen, buried in a spending bill that most representatives probably didn't even read. If they can eliminate a $28 billion industry with no debate, no hearings, and no public input just because they wanted to reopen the government, what else can they ban just as easily? But here's the thing that should really keep you up at night. This isn't just about hemp. Industry experts are already warning that the broad language in this law could affect CBD products too. Even products labeled as THC-free could be impacted if testing reveals minimal amounts of THC or synthesized cannabinoids. A 2023 study found that CBD products frequently contain small amounts of THC, even when they explicitly claim the opposite. So even if you're just buying CBD for sleep or pain management, your products could get swept up in this ban. The enforcement date is November 12th, 2026. That's when products containing more than 0.4 milligrams of total THC per container become federally illegal. The FDA has 90 days to publish lists of which cannabinoids are natural versus synthetic, but the industry expects that 95% of current products won't make the cut. Now, here's where it gets interesting for preppers. These products have a long shelf life when stored properly. Gummies can last 12 years. Tinctures can last 23 years. If you use these products regularly, or if you see them as valuable barter items in an emergency situation, now is the time to stock up. I'm not saying rush out and buy thousands of dollars worth of hemp products, but if these are part of your current routine or part of your emergency preparedness strategy, you need to think seriously about building a personal stockpile before November 2026, because after that date, the only legal options will be through state-licensed cannabis dispensaries in states that have legalized marijuana. And those products are typically 35 times more expensive than what you can buy at a gas station today. Items 3 and 4. Large-scale rainwater collection systems and cisterns. Let me tell you a story that happened to my neighbor in Colorado just last year. He decided he wanted to be more self-sufficient with his water supply. Makes sense, right? He lives on 5 acres, gets decent rainfall, and figured he'd install a nice rainwater collection system. He went to Home Depot, bought a 500-gallon cistern, and set up gutters and downspouts. The whole 9 yards. About $2,000 invested. 3 months later, he gets a notice from the county that his system violates state water collection laws, and he needs to remove it immediately or face fines. It turns out, in Colorado, you're allowed exactly 2 rain barrels with a combined capacity of 110 gallons. That's it. Anything more than that, and you're violating century-old water rights laws that say the rain falling on your property might be needed by someone downstream. Now, Colorado is an extreme case, but the trend across the country is toward more restrictions on water collection, not fewer. And there's a good reason why this should terrify every prepper in America. Water is the ultimate strategic resource. You can live without electricity, without heat, and even without food for weeks. But water, 3 days without water, and you're dead. And right now, while you're watching this video, governments at every level are quietly tightening their control over who gets to collect and store water. Utah requires you to register your rainwater collection system with the state if it exceeds a certain size. Nevada restricts rainwater collection primarily to those who hold water rights. North Carolina limits collection to single-family homes with systems under 20,000 gallons and capture areas under 1 acre. But here's what's really happening behind the scenes. Water utilities and governments are starting to view large-scale private water collection as a threat to their revenue and control. Think about it. Every gallon you collect is a gallon you're not buying from the municipal water company. I talked to a water rights attorney in Arizona who told me that in the next 5 years, he expects to see federal legislation that regulates rainwater collection nationwide. The argument will be environmental protection and watershed management. The reality will be government control over your ability to be water independent. Now, I'm not saying you can't collect rainwater legally in most places. What I'm saying is that large-scale systems, the kind that could actually sustain you through a prolonged emergency, are becoming increasingly regulated. Here's what you need to know. In most states, you can still legally install cisterns, underground storage tanks, and modular water collection systems, but you need to do it now, before the regulatory environment tightens further. I'm talking about real water independence, systems that can collect and store thousands of gallons, underground bladders that can be hidden from view, modular tanks that can be disguised as garden features or landscaping elements. The key is to install these systems while they're still legal and before permits become required, because once governments start requiring permits for water collection, they have the power to deny those permits. Let me give you some specific recommendations. For a family of 4, you want at least 1,000 gallons of storage capacity for a 2-week emergency. That's drinking water, cooking, and basic hygiene. If you want to be truly self-sufficient, you're looking at 5,000 to 10,000 gallons or more. Underground cisterns are your best bet for large-scale storage. They're hidden from view, protected from freezing, and harder for authorities to regulate if the laws change. Expect to pay $30 per gallon of storage capacity installed. Modular above-ground systems are cheaper but more visible. You can often disguise these as landscaping features or install them behind privacy fencing. Cost is typically $13 per gallon of capacity. The other component you need to think about is collection area. Your roof is the obvious choice, but don't forget about outbuildings, barns, sheds, and even properly designed concrete pads. A 2,000 square foot roof can collect about 200 gallons per inch of rainfall. Here's the critical part. You need to install filtration and purification systems too. Rainwater is generally safe, but it can pick up contaminants from your roof, gutters, and storage containers. A basic setup with sediment filtration, carbon filtering, and UV sterilization will run you $500 to $2,000 depending on capacity. But here's what really concerns me. Some states are starting to regulate not just collection, but storage too. California now requires permits for water storage systems over a certain size. Oregon has specific rules about where and how you can store collected rainwater. The writing is on the wall. Water is becoming a controlled resource. If you want the ability to collect and store significant amounts of water on your property, the time to act is now. Because once these systems require permits, environmental impact studies, and government approval, most of us won't be able to afford them or won't be allowed to install them at all. Items 5 and 6, small gas generators and portable power systems. 3 weeks ago, I got a phone call from my brother in Sacramento. He was in a panic because his power had been out for 2 days due to wildfire-related shutoffs, and he needed to keep his mom's oxygen concentrator running. "Where can I buy a generator?" he asked. I had to give him some bad news. In California, you can't buy new gas-powered generators under 25 horsepower anymore. The state banned their sale in 2024 for lawn equipment and extended the ban to generators in 2028. He'd have to drive to Nevada or order one online from another state. That conversation made me realize something that should terrify every prepper. Backup power is becoming a regulated commodity, and California's restrictions are just the beginning. Here's what's actually happening. The California Air Resources Board estimates that running a gas generator for 1 hour creates as much smog as driving a car for 150 miles. Whether you agree with that calculation or not, it's the justification they're using to ban these devices. California's ban targets small off-road engines under 25 horsepower. That covers pretty much every portable generator that regular homeowners can afford. The big whole house standby generators are still legal for now, but those cost $10,000, $20,000 installed, way out of reach for most families. New York is implementing similar restrictions starting in 2026 for new buildings. They're requiring all-electric construction, though emergency generators are still allowed for now. But how long before that exemption disappears? I talked to a generator dealer in Texas who told me that other states are watching California closely. He's already seen legislation proposed in Washington, Oregon, and Illinois that would follow California's model. The regulatory momentum is clearly moving away from gas-powered equipment. Now, let me be clear about something. The ban is on sales, not use. If you already own a gas generator, you can keep using it, but you won't be able to buy new ones, replacement parts will become scarce, and maintenance will become more expensive. Here's why this matters for preppers. Gas generators are still the most cost-effective and reliable option for emergency backup power. Electric alternatives exist, but they're expensive and have serious limitations. A decent 5,000-watt gas generator that can power essential appliances in your home costs $500, $1,500. The equivalent battery-powered system? $3,000, $8,000, and that's assuming you also invest in solar panels to recharge it. Battery systems are great for short outages, but they have limited runtime. A typical battery generator might run your refrigerator for 812 hours. A gas generator can run for days as long as you have fuel. And here's something most people don't think about: cold weather performance. Battery systems lose capacity dramatically in freezing temperatures. Gas generators work fine as long as you can start them. So if you're planning to have reliable backup power for your home or retreat property, gas generators are still your best bet. But the window for buying them is closing rapidly. Here's what I recommend. Get a quality inverter generator in the 3,000, 7,000 watt range from a reputable brand like Honda, Yamaha, or Generac. Expect to pay $800, $12,500 depending on size and features. Inverter generators are quieter, more fuel efficient, and produce cleaner power than conventional generators. They're also more compact and portable, which matters if you need to move them or hide them. Stock up on spare parts too. Air filters, spark plugs, carburetor kits, oil, and fuel stabilizer. A generator is only as good as your ability to maintain it, and parts availability is going to become a problem. Don't forget about fuel storage either. Gas generators obviously need gasoline, but gasoline degrades over time. Invest in proper fuel storage containers and fuel stabilizers that can extend storage life to 23 years. Consider dual fuel or tri-fuel generators that can run on gasoline, propane, or natural gas. Propane has an indefinite storage life and is exempt from most of the environmental regulations targeting gasoline engines. But here's the bigger picture that really concerns me. This isn't just about generators. It's about the government's increasing willingness to ban entire categories of products in the name of environmental protection. Small engines, gasoline-powered equipment, and internal combustion engines in general. These are all targets for future regulations. The auto industry is transitioning to electric vehicles by mandate, not by consumer choice. How long before that same regulatory approach targets everything else we rely on? The lesson here is simple. If you need reliable backup power, get your equipment now while you still can, because the alternatives are either much more expensive or don't exist yet. Items 7 and 8. Nonstick cookware and water-resistant gear. Last month, my wife went to replace our old nonstick pans, and she came home frustrated because half the products she wanted were labeled "coming soon, new formula," or just weren't available at all. What she didn't realize is that we're in the middle of the largest chemical phase-out in U.S. history. PFAS, forever chemicals, are being banned in consumer products across multiple states, and the products being pulled from shelves include a lot of items that preppers commonly rely on. PFAS stands for per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are synthetic chemicals that have been used in industries and consumer products since the 1940s. They're called forever chemicals because they don't naturally break down in the environment or in your body. California banned 4 PFAS chemicals in food products starting January 2025. New Mexico is phasing out PFAS in food packaging and cookware by 2027. West Virginia banned 9 chemicals, including several artificial dyes. More states are following this trend every month. Now, I'm not here to argue whether PFAS are dangerous or not. The science is still evolving, and different people have different risk tolerances. What I'm telling you is that products containing these chemicals are disappearing from the market, and they're not being replaced by equivalent alternatives. Nonstick cookware is the perfect example. Traditional nonstick coatings rely on PFAS to create that slippery surface. As PFAS get banned, manufacturers are scrambling to develop alternatives, but they're either more expensive, less effective, or both. If you're used to cooking with nonstick pans, particularly in an RV or small kitchen where easy cleanup matters, you might want to stock up on quality PFAS-based cookware while it's still available. But cookware is just the beginning. PFAS are also used in water-resistant clothing and gear, food packaging materials, stain-resistant fabrics, certain cleaning products, and outdoor equipment like tents and sleeping bags. I talked to a guy who runs a military surplus store, and he told me that PFAS restrictions are already affecting the availability of water-resistant gear. Field jackets, rain gear, boots, and tents. A lot of the durability and weather resistance comes from PFAS-based treatments. The civilian outdoor gear market is seeing the same trends. Companies like Patagonia and REI have committed to phasing out PFAS in their products, but the alternatives often don't perform as well or cost significantly more. Here's what really concerns me. The regulatory momentum around PFAS is accelerating faster than the development of alternatives. States are banning these chemicals before companies have figured out suitable replacements. Food packaging is another area where this matters. PFAS-free alternatives for grease-resistant packaging often break down faster, don't store as well, or cost more to produce. If you rely on packaged foods for emergency storage, the shelf life and packaging quality could be affected. Now, let me be clear. I'm not advocating that you go out and buy products with dangerous chemicals, but I am saying that if you currently use products that work well for your needs, and those products contain PFAS, you should consider building up your inventory while they're still available. High-quality nonstick cookware, particularly from established brands, can last 5-10 years with proper care. Water-resistant gear can last even longer. These are investments that could serve you well through a transition period while better alternatives are developed. The other thing to consider is cost. PFAS-free alternatives are typically more expensive to manufacture, and those costs get passed on to consumers. A nonstick pan that costs $50 today might cost $80 for the PFAS-free version. Here's my practical recommendation. If you use nonstick cookware regularly, buy a quality set now from a reputable brand. Look for heavy-gauge aluminum with reinforced coatings. These will last longer and perform better than cheap alternatives. For water-resistant gear, focus on items you can't easily replace. A good rain jacket, waterproof boots, and a quality tent. These are investments that can serve you for decades if you buy good ones now. Don't go crazy, but don't wait either. The regulatory environment around PFAS is moving fast, and manufacturers are reformulating products whether the alternatives are ready or not. Items 9 and 10, large battery systems, and solar energy storage. 6 months ago, my neighbor decided to go off-grid with his workshop. He installed a massive battery bank, 48 kilowatt-hours of lithium storage, along with enough solar panels to charge it. The whole system cost him about $35,000, but it made his shop completely energy independent. Last week, he got a visit from the county inspector. Turns out, his system exceeded the local threshold for distributed energy resources and should have been registered with the utility company and the State Energy Commission. Now he's facing potential fines and might have to modify his system to comply with interconnection standards. This is happening across the country, and it should worry every prepper who values energy independence. Right now, you can buy massive battery systems, solar arrays, and energy storage setups with relatively little oversight. But that's changing rapidly. Governments are implementing new rules for grid-tied systems, distributed energy resources, and even off-grid installations above certain sizes. The official justification is grid stability and emergency response coordination. The real effect is making it harder and more expensive to achieve true energy independence. California requires interconnection agreements for solar systems above 10 kilowatts. Texas has new rules for battery storage systems connected to the grid. Florida requires permits for solar installations over a certain size, even if they're not connected to the utility. Here's what's really happening. As more people install solar and battery systems, utilities are losing revenue. They're responding by lobbying for regulations that either force you to stay connected to the grid or limit your ability to go truly independent. Energy storage is also becoming a national security issue. Large lithium battery systems use materials that are mostly controlled by China. The Department of Energy is starting to track where these systems are installed and who owns them. I spoke with a solar installer in Arizona who told me that permit requirements for battery systems have tripled in complexity over the past 2 years. Projects that used to take weeks now take months to approve. The trend is clear. Large-scale energy storage is moving from unregulated to heavily regulated. If energy independence is important to your preparedness plans, the time to invest is now, before these systems require permits, inspections, and ongoing compliance monitoring. Here's what you need to know about building a substantial energy storage system. Lithium iron phosphate batteries are your best bet for large-scale storage. They're safer than other lithium chemistries, have longer lifespans, and don't require complex cooling systems. Expect to pay $300–$600 per kilowatt-hour of storage capacity. For a typical home backup system, you want 1,050 kWh of storage. That's enough to run essential loads: refrigerator, lights, communications, and medical equipment for 25 days without solar charging. Solar charging capacity depends on your location and energy needs, but a general rule is 1 kilowatt of solar for every 46 kilowatt hours of daily energy consumption. So if you use 20 kilowatts per day, you need 45 kilowatts of solar panels. The key is to size your system large enough to meet your actual needs, not just what looks good on paper. Most people underestimate their energy consumption and end up with systems that can't sustain them through extended outages. But here's the critical part. You want to install these systems before they require permits and interconnection agreements. Once governments start regulating energy storage, the costs and complexity go way up. You'll need electrical inspections, utility approvals, ongoing monitoring, and potentially annual compliance reports. All of that adds cost and creates opportunities for governments to deny your applications or force you to modify your systems. The other trend to watch is battery chemistry restrictions. Some states are considering regulations on lithium battery storage due to fire safety concerns. Others are looking at restrictions on specific battery chemistries or installation requirements. If you're serious about energy independence, act now while you still have the freedom to design and install systems that meet your actual needs rather than government regulations. Item 11. Gold and silver for economic insurance. Let me end with something that might surprise you: precious metals. Specifically, gold and silver that you can hold in your hands. Most preppers know that in 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, which made it illegal for Americans to own more than $100 worth of gold. Citizens were required to turn in their gold to the Federal Reserve at a fixed price set by the government. That ban lasted for 41 years. Could it happen again? Most people say no, we're not on the gold standard anymore, so there's no economic justification, but I'm not so sure. We're looking at unprecedented government debt, inflation concerns, and economic uncertainty. If the government decides that private gold ownership is destabilizing the currency or interfering with monetary policy, the precedent for confiscation already exists. Silver has never been confiscated on the same scale as gold, partly because it's more abundant and has more industrial uses. But that doesn't mean it's immune from future regulations. What really concerns me is the increasing push toward digital currencies and cashless transactions. If physical cash becomes obsolete and all transactions go through digital systems, the government will have unprecedented ability to track and control your financial activity. Physical precious metals represent one of the few stores of value that can't be frozen, confiscated electronically, or devalued by monetary policy, but only if you can acquire them legally and hold them without government interference. If precious metals are part of your preparedness strategy, whether for economic insurance or potential barter purposes, now is the time to acquire what you plan to hold long term. Because if restrictions do come, you want to already be grandfathered in. Focus on common, recognizable forms: American eagles, Canadian maples, and junk silver coins. Avoid exotic alloys, collectibles, or anything that might be hard to verify or trade in an emergency. Store them properly in a safe, safety deposit box, or other secure location. And remember, the goal isn't to get rich off precious metals. It's to preserve purchasing power through economic disruptions. So there you have it. 11 categories of items that are either becoming illegal, heavily regulated, or significantly more expensive to acquire. Hemp products, 11 months until the federal ban takes effect. Water collection systems, regulations tightening every year. Gas generators, banned in California, spreading to other states. PFAS containing products, being pulled from shelves right now. Energy storage systems, moving from unregulated to heavily regulated. And precious metals, economic uncertainty, increasing confiscation risk. The pattern is clear. The window for acquiring these items at current prices and availability is closing rapidly. I'm not telling you to panic or spend money you don't have, but I am telling you to take this seriously and prioritize based on your actual needs and circumstances. Research the specific laws in your state. Build relationships with local suppliers. Start acquiring backup supplies for the items you rely on most. And remember, the best time to prepare is before you need to. If this information was valuable, make sure to subscribe and check out my video on food storage strategies that actually work in real emergencies.